was moving in. She had a few chairs unloaded, all kinds of other things going on with the unloading at their house. And Dixie told Tony, have a seat. And Tony said, no, that's okay. And Dixie said, have a seat. And Tony, I really had. Tony ended up seated. And Tony pretty much had the view at that point that I don't think I can ever become friends with somebody that is this pushy. But Dixie didn't give you a choice on that either. There's now a point where I do see a connection between Dixie and the events of this story, and that's the part where we see Mary. Mary sitting at Jesus' feet, hearing his words, followed by Jesus saying, Mary has chosen the good part, which will not be taken away from her. Dixie sat at Jesus' feet and heard his words. Dixie chose the good part. It will not be taken away from her. But the thing that impresses me about this story, where I see her growing from the example of this story, is that Dixie's life is one where she exemplified both Martha and Mary. I think Martha's gift was serving. Her stumbling was not that she was cooking a meal, it was that she started spazzing out over the whole thing. If you have a looser translation, I think Jesus says, chill out. And at their best, Mary listened to Jesus, and Martha was there serving and walking in, picking up bits and pieces of the Bible study as she could go. And again, that's the image I have of Dixie, being both Mary and Martha. I remember those meals at her house. I don't think she ever sat down. I just remember her being in motion the whole time. She was Martha at her best, and she was also the one hearing the word of Jesus and following him. She was Mary at her best. Hearing, believing, and serving, and this is what became that mission. In our school class, we were reading the Brothers Karamazov. Thank you again, Scott, for pushing me to reading that book years ago. I read a sentence yesterday and I was just so thankful to God raising up Dostoevsky years ago to write this and write it in part for me to come across yesterday. It was describing the Christian character in that book, Alyosha. And the book says, the nature of his love was always active. He could not love passively. Once he loved, he immediately also began to help. And whenever I read that, like, he's describing Dixie here. Let me restate it about her. The nature of her love was always active. She could not love passively. Once she loved, she immediately also began to help. There have been many stories retold in the last few days. There are many memories of this active love. Some of you remember David Leach. He wrote this to me yesterday. He said, I did not know her very well, but I remember talking with her for a relatively lengthy time in her yard many years ago about some theological issue long forgotten. I seem to recall that she was sweetly scolding me about something, but ever so graciously. She always seemed to be the consummate Christian, classy lady. And many of us got those sweet scoldings. Whenever I read her age in the obituary, I knew she was close to my age. I didn't realize she was younger. I sometimes kind of thought she was my mother. And I was never really sure whether she was the mother to 4 girls or to 40,000 people, depending upon who she was coming in contact with. Like many of you, I had the occasion a week or so back in my case of having that final visit. And I have to confess that as far as me accomplishing what I thought I could accomplish when I went there, I failed. I went there with the idea that, okay, I'm going to see her for what I think will be the last time, to encourage, to find something to say. And I just sat there, unable to talk, stumbling for words. And then she just kind of looked at me. Did you come to pray with me? Yes. And so I worked through this prayer that I'm barely getting out sentences. I'm just crying the whole time. And then whenever I finished, she prayed for me. And it was not like just a regular prayer. It was more like she was giving me this commission. Like it was a new ordination, like she was sending me out for my next mission. Her life was mission, and part of that mission was to send the rest of us out on our mission. And after the prayer, we talked some more. And we talked about one of our very common topics, one of our favorite theological topics, stomach aches. And there she was, having been through horrible times, and she was exhorting me and encouraging me, saying, you're going to get out in front of all this. I don't know that I have today. But she was telling me, you're going to get out in front of this. You're going to get beyond this. And here was this dying woman telling me how to live for God. So typical of her. Sometime after that, Stephanie and I were talking to Stephanie's brother and his wife about Dixie's condition, and our sister-in-law didn't know about this, and she was shocked, and she made the comment. She said, well, Dixie was always sending me cards whenever my children were born on other occasions, and she hardly knew me. And the only thing that was surprising about this story was that it was not surprising. A few months ago, late December, I walked into Books A Million, and Dixie and Nancy were in there at the coffee shop, and Dixie called out, you had a birthday this week, didn't you? Yes. Well, let me give you some money. Walking into a bookstore, somebody's saying, let me give you some money. No, you don't need to do that. But did saying no ever work with her? Not when there was mission. Somehow or another, all of us in this room have been affected by this woman and her mission. From our perspective in this world, it would seem to us that the better thing for God's work would be for Dixie to be here for a long time. For this day to be delayed another 40 years. And that's what we prayed for. And even whenever it became increasingly clear that God was calling Dixie home, to use Lydia's phrase, we were still hoping that something would change. And I had one of those moments that perhaps some of you others had. Perhaps you girls had it. Perhaps, Tom, you had this. And it's that occasion where we pray and we pray certain words, and then sometimes when the intensity of something is upon us, we find ourselves talking to God in a different way. It is just an open honesty there, knowing I can't hide anything from God. And in this particular case, I went from grief to this sudden wave of anger that came all over me. And it was that moment of me questioning God, looking at this saying, this looks like a bureaucratic mistake. God, do you know what you're doing? And I like God's answer in those situations. That divine, holy silence. Just that quietness, that feeling of embarrassment on my part that I ever even ventured to say such a thing. And again, God in His awesome power and love and wisdom being silent. And it's at that point that I began realizing that we weren't offering up prayers to God about Dixie to change God. Those prayers to God were to change us. God working once again to bring Dixie's mission to the next stage of completion. Well, Dixie's mission did not end Monday morning. As Randy emphasized here, it was just the beginning. It's entered a new phase. Tom, the Rock of Gibraltar, he taught us, even in this. I'm not going to look at you. I came up with Tom yesterday, and I saw him a couple of occasions, but Tom and Bess and Ruth were at the funeral home, and I'm walking up to him thinking, again, what do I say to this man? And I walked up and Tom says, come join the party. This man is amazing. I understand enough about a ship having an anchor. I have never understood an anchor having a ship. and these 4 daughters. Thank God that the Dixie Energy and Mission